All right, I want to make this short little video for you on analyzing point of view. I'm hoping you use this to study for the document-based question and the point of view analysis part of it. I think a lot of you are doing a good job with it, but it seems like something we struggle with, and I hope this is just a good little review to give you some more practice, some more thoughts, and some more ideas for what to think about. So to begin with, I've taken some words from the AP Guidebook. I've taken, first off, their description of it. All right. How or why is the source's point of view, the source's purpose, the source's historical situation, or the source's audience relevant to the argument? So what do they mean is, you have your document, you read your document. How is this source's stuff? The source's information, the purpose, all those kind of things I just read. How is that relevant? How does who they are impact what they said or what they painted or what they wrote? So how or why is the source's point of view, purpose, historical situation, or audience relevant to the argument? Here's what they do, the AP people do, to explain or to grade you. This is the rubric part of it. So again, you have the how or why right there in bold and underlined, but you also have on the bottom the other part, relevant to an argument about the prompt. Remember, the DBQ is a historically defensible claim. It's an argument. Here's what you think, here's what you're arguing. How does this POV, point of view, influence that? How is it relevant? Why do we care? That's what you need to include in there. All right. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the point of view of different documents that come from the attribution. We'll get to attribution here in a few seconds. There are two places you could actually analyze point of view. The first one, pay attention to internal evidence, is the harder of the two. That's reading the document, taking information from the document, and analyzing it from the tone of the document. The external evidence, or the second part down here, that's typically the better or easier way to do it. All right, and again, those words in the parentheses should look a lot like the words on the last slide. So again, two places to look for point of view. There's the internal, the document, or the external, that's the attribution, that is the source. So you should know this. I'm sure we've done it 100 times trying to get this lined up. The source is going to be on top. It's going to be the author, the title of the document, the date, maybe yeah, those are the big three. Not all of those things are going to be on there, but anything that is on there is useful, and make sure you look that over. So again, two places to look for point of view. So what is the attribution? Attribution is the info about the document. It's the source. As I just tried to do with my hands there, the source is going to be up on top. It's the first thing that you'll see. These are some different things about the attribution. Not all of them are in the source. Some of these things are questions you read into it. So who wrote it is typically going to be in the source work. That'll be, for example, Louis XVI. What is a document? Speech given to his advisors. So you got the first two, and then it gives you the date. Well, they're not going to give you in the attribution what was his occupation. What are some identifying characteristics? Where was it given? Why was it given? Those might be in there. The where might be in there. The why probably not. So this is about reading into it. This is the beginning of your point of view analysis. So obviously Louis XVI is a king. This is a simple one. You know, Karl Marx, he was an author and a Marxist, creator of Marxism. Eugene Delacroix. This is a Eugene Delacroix painting from 1830. Well, Eugene Delacroix was a romantic. 1830 is the Greek Revolution. Boom, I can go a lot more from there. So the document's attribution, you got to start with the source information and read more into it using these kind of questions. All right, here's what you can do then. We're starting to get into the meat of this little analysis. All right. Why was this person introducing this piece of information at this time or in this manner? Why are they doing that? So a lot of attribution, a lot of point of view analysis is questions, you thinking, figuring it out, remembering it, and then putting it into the paper. All right, putting it into your essay, incorporating it, weaving it in throughout the essay. All right, ask yourself the bottom question here. What would have to change to make this person say something different? So I'm sitting there thinking about the situation, I'm thinking about the document. Well, if this was this and this was that, the document would be different. So what would have to change to make the person say something different? That's kind of an interesting point to think about. So use the attribution, use the source to come up with the information. Now, I got a few things you shouldn't do. Again, you can read them on your own. You should read them on your own. But I want to point out just a couple of them on this side and the next slide. All right, I want to talk about number 3 just for a couple seconds here. A lot of people like to group them all together. So remember, you come up with your group of documents to prove your point, and then you just group the documents together and you say, like the example here in number 3. Therefore, we know the first-hand woman's what women's roles are like. Well, you can't group them all together. A bourgeoisie woman is different than a proletariat woman, is different than a king's wife, but yet they all might want rights. Well, why and what kind of rights? Remember, we talk all the time about peasant women wanting food. All right, and the king's wife having all the food she wants, but they still might want more respect or something like that. So the point with number 3 is don't just group them all together. Don't put them all into one. Make sure you read number 1, number 2, but I wanted to stress number 3. I also want to stress this one right here. All right, this is a huge one. My face box might be messing with the picture over there. Let's see if I can slide it over so you get the full effect. All right, simply saying bias, the document is bias without justification is wrong. I have told you numerous times I don't like the word bias or biased. I've given you a list of 8 other terms I think are better. This explains it right here. All right, claiming bias without justification is not point of view. If you write the author is biased because he is blank, that is not sufficient. That is not good enough. That is a huge POV don't. Don't just write bias. Use the words I've given you, and I will repeat again at the video. All right, so here's what I have. I've got a couple examples. I have some documents, I have some source work, source information, and then I've got a few good examples of the point of view. What you should do right now is pause the video for about a minute, 30 seconds, however long it takes you to read this document, and then we'll check out the attribution, the source on the next slide, and then a good example of point of view. So I'm going to go here to the next slide, and here's where that document on the last slide came from. It's a journalist's report on working conditions of female textile workers in Germany, 1880s, 1890s. So if we're looking at the attribution, we have a journalist. We have a report. We don't have the name of a journalist, but we do have a report. Textile workers, female, and dates in a country. So looking at all of that, and knowing what was in the document on the last slide, here's a good example of point of view analysis. Here's some good sentences that you could write about. Very detailed, cover multiple parts of it. It implies that you have dug deep and you're reading it for, content, but you also know what you're talking about. So in this example here, some of the things I like that they quoted. I don't really like the quoting. I tell you not to do that for the source information, but for here in the point of view, it's a little bit better. Okay, I could not have stood this for long. Well, so what? Well, that implies that they weren't there. They weren't a part of it. Well, how do you know? Because they couldn't have stood it for long. Meaning, if I had stood there and done it, I would have written something like, I couldn't take it much longer. But you've just analyzed the point of view and said, okay, this is someone that hasn't done it. They haven't been there. Why does that matter? Think back to a couple slides ago. What would have to change for this information to change? Well, what would this woman be writing? Again, this is the previous slide. Go back and check it out. If she was there working and not reporting on it, would she be harsher? Would she be tougher? Would she be happier? Would she be sadder? I mean, if you talk about here, she talks about difficult work. This is tough, unbearable, was an awful situation kind of stuff, makes it a little bit more bearable. But maybe she'd describe it even harsher if it was part of her actual world. Okay, one more example here, Joseph Stalin. So now I've given you the source and the document information on the same slide. So he's delivering a speech. I know we didn't talk about him in 2020 when I'm making this video, but hopefully other years we'll get to this far. So he's the dictator of the Soviet Union, taking over for Lenin, late 20s throughout the 30s, all the way up into the 50s. Okay, this is his report. Well, how do I take this source information plus the report content and analyze point of view? Here you go. Here again is an example of how you could do that. All right. They've taken some information and they've given you multiple parts to it. This is only one sentence, but it has a compound sentence and there's multiple parts to it. There's multiple things that go with it. So again, you could pause this and check it out if you wanted to. All right, would be a good thing to do. All right, we talk about paintings or photographs. Here's some key points for you. I got 4 bullets. I'm not going to read them to you because you can do it on your own. You could pause it and do it, or any way you want to do it. But here's 4 key points when it comes to paintings or photographs. They're different. Obviously take longer to produce, typically after the fact. Now, photograph might be at the time, probably at the time, but even like war pictures from the 1860s and 70s, it's going to be a day or two or maybe at least a few hours afterwards. So check this list out and use this for photographs or paintings. Here's some stuff on charts or graphs. Same kind of thing. Lots of questions to think about. Can this be analyzed? Absolutely. Can you do point of view from a chart or a graph? Absolutely. This tells you how. All right, the first one's probably the most important. How was it collected? The second bullet is kind of interesting. Why publish it? The third bullet point, kind of useful. So look at all that kind of stuff. All right, I've given you these terms before. As I said, the big don't when it comes to analyzing point of view. You don't want to use the word bias, especially without explaining why. So here's some better terms: predisposed, predisposition, prejudice, mindset of, influenced by, preference, proclivity, and perspective of. Those are good words to use instead of just the word bias. All right. To put it another way, your task is as an historian to sift through the sources. Review the source, understand why and what and who. In other words, you're analyzing what it is about the source that made them say or write that. You're looking for credibility, legitimacy, reliability, pertinence. Is it relevant? Is it relevant? Look it over and analyze it for all those things. These are good questions you could ask when trying to do point of view. When, why, who, what, so on and so forth. What's the motivation? Okay, intended audience. These are all good questions you could read through, pause the video, and check them out. All right, putting it all together, you get the POV. This person would be producing this piece of information at this time. We've already talked a little bit about that. Then you can evaluate how much you trust the information. How much do you trust it? How accurate is it really? What do you think is really going on? All right, so hopefully this gives you some good ideas. It gives you a good review. There's different places I would stop and read on your own. I'm not going to stop and read all of it to you, but hopefully this helps you. Hopefully this helps you understand what to do. Even though most of you are doing it pretty well, it could still hopefully serve as a good review.